We welcome in and start our legislative conversations this week. Yesterday we had 35th District Representative Drew McEwen. Today it's Dan Griffey. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning. Nice seeing both of you.
Nice to see you. And you can follow Dan on his website at dangriffey.houserepublicans.wa.gov. We'll put the links to that too. Where
I can't do anything about how long it is.
Oh, I know. Shorten that up. Asking you as well to take the 2020 survey. And, well, let's start with your thoughts on the state of the state, and then we'll move on through what's going on this week.
Well, before we do that,
Yes.
I'd like to say that that Facebook skit you did yesterday was hilarious.
Wait, which one?
The Facebook thing that you were talking about, I showed just on the street, did the things that I would do on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm followed by four.
Funny, huh?
Four people. That was hilarious.
It's so true.
So I'm encouraged and discouraged a little bit by what the governor said. I mean, he didn't really give a lot of direction, and that's kind of the criticism, open criticism, a lot of us in Olympia have had about the governor needs to really show a lot more leadership. That piece you posted about Senator Mike Padden saying there needs to be more oversight. Absolutely. I've been on a crusade against contraband getting into our correctional facilities. They're in a lockdown. I've toured almost all of them. There's several layers of security. There's fences. They live in a cell, yet they can get meth, they can get heroin, they can get all that stuff. So I'm losing my patience about the Secretary of Corrections saying, well, it's just going to happen. I think inevitability, sometimes when you get the inevitability statement from directors or secretaries, there's a lack of focus, and there's a lack of leadership, and a lack of we really got to do something about that, because there's many people that go to prison, maybe good people doing bad things, maybe bad people doing bad things, but having the distraction of the addictive properties of all these this contraband coming in is not helping anybody, because what our goal is to make them better citizens that won't reoffend, so society is protected.
It is strange to me watching multiple episodes of Lockup and things like that when they show the wall of contraband, like what all there is able to make it through. And a lot of these things too are electronic devices, cell phones and things like that. And like you said, they go through checks, and the visitors coming in go through checks and pat downs and metal detectors, and whether or not you're going to catch everything all of the time, there are repercussions if you're bringing something like that in as well, that you yourself could get into a heck of a lot.
Well, I sit on the committee that's at least legislative oversight for corrections, and we get presentations from the secretary and assistant secretary and the different department heads all the time. And I want to give them the resources they need. I think safety and security of our officers needs to be number one. The tragedy of Jamie Bendel being killed, lack of a camera. Camera these days are not that expensive.
Sure.
Lack of somebody watching those camera monitors, those kind of things could have saved that lady's life. So I really do believe that some more pressure oversight of corrections would help.
Do you get a sense that, and this might be too for the officers who go to the jails, that once you get through the wall, it kind of goes off the rest of the population's radar? You know what I'm saying? That's happening in there.
Oh, definitely.
So
society wants to they cry over the crime, and then society wants to be done with it and move on there with their life, and that's normal. And what needs to happen is we need to be very responsive and make sure there's programs, make sure that they come out less likely or not likely to reoffend, don't have the ability any longer to injure society, and that's what our goal has to be in corrections. It's not we're putting people in prison. There's sometimes we put them in prison and they don't get out because they have committed a crime so egregious, so heinous that we don't want them out.
Yeah.
But when they are going to get out, maybe prison needs to look different. especially not continuing their addiction. And their addiction may have been the primary cause of them making that grave error and injuring society. So, I'm going to continue to put pressure on them. While I think they're doing good work with the resources they currently have, the correction officers have some ideas about how to reduce or eliminate contraband. One of them is bringing back the drug sniffing dog that we had at Shelton. It's relatively low amount of money, so I'm reaching out with Secretary of Corrections to see, can we do that? Can we do a trial maybe up here at WCC?
How many of those types of, not tips, but ideas come from the rank and file, would you think eventually get put into the working model of how things go? Not just corrections, but across state government. When you have someone who works on a low level, who is kind of the ticket taker, let's say, if you will, has an idea of how to make these things streamline better, is there the ears open as you get higher up in the echelons to hear from those types of folks?
So every department varies. When I get reports back from the people, the boots on the ground that actually do the job, some are saying, my agency is very responsive to my ideas and how to make my job easier and more effective. But some say that it's, a closed door, go do your job, and this is how you do it. So it's all over the map. Really, it's up to the governor's office to manage that. The legislature segregated most of their oversight responsibilities probably 15, 20 years ago now. And you can see the pain from legislature. We're trying to bring that back. And, one of the ways we did that with the new agency, the Department of Youth and Families.
The old DSHS.
Children, old DSHS. And that has direct oversight from legislature, direct legislative participation in the oversight committee. And I think that reflects that if we're going to make significant changes to our agencies, we want some more say, because they're directly responsible and responsive, their services to our constituents, and we want to be more involved in how that looks.
Yeah.
The governor's spent a lot of time talking about homelessness, as he should have. It's a huge issue affecting the state and a lot of our bigger cities and creeping into the smaller towns and cities too. But I get dismayed when it's just all about putting a roof over someone's head. Maybe we could talk about that for a moment. It's much deeper than that. It would be like if I gave everybody in Shelton $1 million, if I had it to give. It doesn't make them rich, because by the end of the year, most people will be without the $1 million again. So it's not as simple as just making poor people rich by handing them money. And you can't make someone not homeless just by giving a roof over their head, putting them in a tiny house. If the drug addiction that goes along with that, maybe a lot of mental illness, a lot of underlying violent problems aren't resolved as well.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that? Just throwing.
I have a lot of thoughts. I give a lot of presentations on this, and I think you have to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and a lot of if you don't know who he was a clinical psychiatrist that wrote a very good paper, and people use it now, that talks about individuals' hierarchy of needs, and he envisions a ladder, life, and your life is climbing a ladder, and self-actualization would be the goal. You can't give people self-actualization. They have to earn it. So all of what we do has to be, welfare and those sort of things, is how do we help people have the love to help people put their foot on the first rung of that ladder and then teach them to climb. Self-actualization is an earned trait, and writing a check is an example of non-earned trait, right? So all of what we do, supportive housing needs to be there. So when somebody's in total crises, they need to have a crisis response team. And all too often what we need to do now is just say, you don't have the ability, because the monkey on your back, that drug or that mental illness, to steer the ship well. The choice to live on the street, I've interviewed many hundreds of people living on the street of Shelton, and some of them say it's a choice, and I challenge anyone to say it's really a choice. Is that a choice made because they have the addictive problem? Is it a choice made because of the mental illness? And if we get through that, through the crisis point, give them stable housing, and then rebuild their lives in kind of group settings where we're supportive and teaching them again. Maybe you've never had a supporting, nurturing, loving experience in your life. Teach them how to love themselves and take care of themselves again. It all has to be there, but housing has to be there. We have, most estimates about a 215 to 270,000 unit shortage in Washington State to have a stable housing market. So we got to cut through all that. But you're absolutely right. It's not just that someone's homeless and putting somebody in a house. You could put them in a house and fill it full of money, and they'd burn the money possibly and tear the house down, right? It has to be wrapped around. It has to be something, charity delivered with love. And we need to understand that one's self-actualization has to be earned. It cannot be given. And so a fundamental change on how we as society shows our love, I think, is in order at this point in time.
Dan, do you have the new committee assignments of what you're working on this session yet?
I'm on the same committees this year, which is really nice. Public safety, so that's the one where it's direct oversight of corrections and crimes and punishment in Washington State. I have local government, which is all the issues that come, and it's a hybrid committee because there's also state government, which they overlap a little bit. But the rules and regulations that our local officials have to follow, and then I'm on the House Early Learning Committee, all rewarding committees and all committees that I want to work on. On the public safety front, I'm working on a bill that fundamentally changes the definition of theft in Washington State, and I think I sent you guys a press release about that about a month ago. Right now, property crime is at an alarming rate. It's just off the charts. And let's face it, folks, all of the cost of our goods that we're buying are increased in price because of this. And we're looking the other way. If you take an item and you conceal it in your jacket and you haven't committed a crime until you leave the premises. The problem behind that is we find that public safety interest here, or for the public safety interest here, is if we know that people have a fight or flight reaction. When you catch them right at the door, they're more likely to have the flight reaction and mull people over, young people and that sort of thing. And I think the Mervyn's event shows up in Seattle that it's true response. So my bill would change the definition of theft to the crime occurred when you conceal the item. That way, property conservation, property loss prevention folks at our stores and facilities can engage the individual that's shoplifting right away. And most times, a lot of people talk about, well, we're going to put people in prison for stealing food. That's not what the retail association and the small mom and pop stores really want to do. They want to stop that activity, but right now, because of liquor has been legalized and on the shelf, there is millions of dollars of liquor being stolen and other things. So we're trying not to look the other way, being a little harder on that. And a lot of times people that engage in this need help. So how can we identify this and get them into help?
Dan Griffey again on his website at dangriffey.houserepublicans.wa.gov. And again, we appreciate your access to coming in and talking with us about things going on every week here.
Thank you. I like that promo you guys did.
Yeah, you like that?
That was kind of nice. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you were able to hear that. We just put the wraps on that early this morning. So.
Nice.